The morning sun cut through the glass towers of downtown Chicago as Sloane Mitchell stepped out of her rideshare, her cream blazer crisp against the October chill. At 32, she had fought her way to senior marketing executive at Apex Media Group through sheer determination and countless sleepless nights. The daughter of a seamstress who worked double shifts to keep them afloat, Sloane had learned early that nothing came easy and everything had to be earned twice over. She pushed through the revolving doors of the Apex building, nodding to the security guard who knew her by name. Friday mornings meant the weekly creative sync, and today was particularly important. The company had just hired a new creative director to revamp their entire content strategy, someone with an impressive portfolio from New York agencies. Sloane had prepared extensively, determined to prove that her marketing team could adapt to any creative vision. The conference room on the 18th floor was already filling up when she arrived. Her assistant, Diana, had saved her usual seat near the presentation screen. Sloane settled in, arranging her tablet and notes while making small talk with the product managers flanking her. The room buzzed with speculation about the new hire. Nobody had met him yet. The VP of Operations, Christine Park, had kept the identity surprisingly confidential. Christine entered at exactly 9 o'clock, her silver hair swept back in an elegant chignon. Behind her walked a man in a charcoal suit, and Sloane felt the blood drain from her face. Garrett Hayes. It could not be him. It could not possibly be the same person who had made her college years a living competition, who had challenged every idea she presented in their marketing seminars, who had beaten her by half a percentage point for the highest GPA in their program. But there he stood, older now with faint lines around his eyes and a more refined presence, yet unmistakably the same man who had been her academic nemesis at Northwestern University. Their eyes met across the room, and she watched recognition flare in his dark brown gaze. His expression remained professionally neutral, but his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Everyone, please welcome Garrett Hayes, our new creative director," Christine announced with obvious pride. Garrett comes to us from Momentum Agency in New York, where he led campaigns for some of the biggest brands in retail and entertainment. We're thrilled to have his vision guiding our creative output. Sloane forced herself to smile and clap along with everyone else. Her mind raced through memories she had carefully boxed away. Northwestern's business school, where she and Garrett had been the top 2 students in their cohort. Every group project became a battle. Every presentation turned competitive. She remembered staying up until 3 in the morning perfecting proposals, knowing Garrett would do the same. She remembered the way professors would pit them against each other, asking them to debate marketing strategies in front of the entire class. She also remembered, though she tried not to, the way her heart would race when he walked into a room. The way she noticed everything about him even as she pretended indifference. The careful distance she maintained because admitting attraction would mean acknowledging a vulnerability she could not afford. Garrett began his presentation, outlining his vision for Apex's creative direction. He was polished and confident, his ideas genuinely innovative. Sloane found herself begrudgingly impressed even as old competitive instincts flared. When he opened the floor for questions, her hand went up automatically. "The influencer integration strategy you mentioned," Sloane said, keeping her voice level and professional. "How do you plan to measure authentic engagement versus purchased metrics? Our brand reputation depends on genuine connections." Garrett's eyes locked on hers. "Excellent question, and one I anticipated from this team. We'll implement a 3-tier verification system." He launched into a detailed explanation that addressed every concern she might have raised. It was thorough, well-researched, and exactly the kind of comprehensive answer she would have demanded. The meeting continued for another 40 minutes, and Sloane felt the old rhythm returning despite herself. She asked challenging questions. Garrett provided solid answers. The rest of the team watched with increasing interest, sensing an undercurrent they could not quite identify. As the meeting adjourned, Sloane gathered her materials quickly, intending to escape before any awkward conversation could occur. But Christine called out, asking her to stay back with a few other department heads. Garrett remained as well, and suddenly they were part of a smaller group discussing timeline integration. The discussion stretched on. By the time it ended, it was nearly 11, and Sloane had back-to-back meetings scheduled. She excused herself and headed for the elevator bank, desperate for a few moments alone to process the morning's revelation. The elevator doors were closing when a hand shot between them. They slid open again, and Garrett stepped inside. They were alone. The doors closed. Sloane pressed the button for the 23rd floor, where her next meeting waited. Garrett pressed nothing. The elevator began its ascent. "Sloane," he said quietly. "We should keep this professional," she interrupted, staring straight ahead at the brushed metal doors. "Of course. I just wanted to say it's good to see you." "Is it?" The words escaped before she could stop them. Garrett turned to face her. 5 years is a long time. I thought maybe we could start fresh." Sloane opened her mouth to respond when the elevator jolted violently. The lights flickered. Then everything stopped. They stood frozen as the emergency lighting clicked on, bathing the small space in dim amber. The digital floor indicator blinked erratically between 12 and 13. "You have got to be kidding me," Sloane muttered, reaching for the emergency call button. She pressed it repeatedly. A crackling voice came through the speaker, distant and unclear. "Elevator 17 experiencing technical difficulties. Please remain calm. We're working to resolve the issue. Building evacuation is underway due to a fire alarm on the 9th floor. All elevator systems have been automatically shut down as a safety precaution. Emergency crews are on site." The speaker went dead. Sloane and Garrett stared at each other in the confined space, the weight of 5 years and a complicated past settling between them like a third presence. Outside, they could hear the muffled sounds of people evacuating through the stairwells, voices echoing in the building's core. "How long do these things usually take?" Garrett asked, loosening his tie slightly. "Could be 20 minutes. Could be 2 hours, Sloane said, sliding down to sit on the elevator floor, her back against the wall. "Depends on whether it's actually a fire or just another false alarm from the construction on 9. Garrett hesitated, then sat opposite her, their legs nearly touching in the narrow space. "This is not how I imagined my first day going." "Nothing ever goes as planned," Sloane said. "You should know that by now." Silence stretched between them. The emergency lighting cast shadows across Garrett's face, making him look both familiar and like a stranger. Sloane could feel her heart beating too fast, the way it always had around him, though she had convinced herself years ago that it was just adrenaline from competition. "We should talk," Garrett said finally. "About what?" "Marketing strategies? Your impressive New York portfolio? About Northwestern? About why you avoided me for the entire second semester of senior year? About the fact that we both know there was more happening than academic rivalry." Sloane closed her eyes. "We are not doing this. We are trapped in an elevator, and we are not unpacking college history. When else are we going to do it?" Garrett's voice was gentle but insistent. "We're going to be working together, Sloane. Closely, from what Christine described. We can't pretend the past doesn't exist. Watch me," she said, but even as the words left her mouth, she knew he was right. 5 years ago, she had run from Northwestern, from him, from feelings that terrified her more than any exam or presentation ever could. She had taken the first job offer that came, moved to Chicago, and built a life that did not include Garrett Hayes in any capacity. Now here he was, unavoidable, and they were stuck together with nothing but time and truth between them. The emergency lighting hummed softly, the only sound besides their breathing in the stalled elevator. Sloane kept her eyes closed, but she could feel Garrett's gaze on her, patient and unwavering. She had forgotten that about him, how he could wait out any silence until the other person broke. "Remember the Starbucks campaign project?" Garrett asked softly, breaking the quiet himself this time. Junior year, Professor Davidson's class. Sloane opened her eyes. The one where we had to pitch competing strategies for their loyalty program redesign. You stayed up for 3 nights straight on that presentation. I know because I saw the timestamp on the draft you accidentally sent to the whole group at 4 in the morning. You stayed up just as long, Sloane countered. Your presentation was 47 slides. Nobody does 47 slides without losing sleep. Garrett leaned his head back against the elevator wall. I kept thinking if I could just make mine better than yours, more comprehensive, more innovative, then maybe you would look at me the way you looked at those marketing theories. Like I was something worth studying. Sloane's breath caught. What are you talking about? Come on, Sloane. We're adults now. We can admit that the rivalry was never just about grades. Garrett's voice carried a hint of frustration mixed with something softer. Every time I challenged you in class, you would get this fire in your eyes. It was the only time you really saw me, really engaged with me as more than just another classmate. So I kept doing it. That's ridiculous, Sloane said, but her voice lacked conviction. You were genuinely competitive. You wanted to be the best. I wanted you to notice me, Garrett corrected. The competition was just the only language we seemed to speak. Sloane pulled her knees up, wrapping her arms around them. The elevator felt smaller now, more intimate. You had plenty of people noticing you. You dated Emma Cartwright for most of junior year. She was student body president and looked like she walked out of a catalog. Emma was nice, Garrett said quietly. But she wasn't you. She didn't argue with me about consumer psychology at midnight in the library. She didn't leave sticky notes with sarcastic comments on my papers when we peer-reviewed. She didn't make my heart race every time she walked into a room. Stop, Sloane whispered. You can't just say things like that. Why not? We're stuck here. Might as well be honest. Garrett shifted, leaning forward slightly. You want to know what I remember most about Northwestern? Not the awards or the grades or the internship offers. I remember the way you would bite your lower lip when you were thinking through a problem. I remember how you always ordered the same coffee, black with 2 sugars, even though you made a face like it was too bitter every single time. I remember the day I saw you crying in the student center after you got a call from home, and how you wiped your tears away so fast and put your armor back on before anyone else could see. Sloane felt her throat tighten. That phone call had been her mother telling her the medical bills were piling up, that she might need to drop a semester to help. Sloane had called in extra shifts at her campus job instead, sleeping 4 hours a night for 6 months. She had never told anyone about that struggle. You saw that? She asked. I saw everything about you, Garrett said. I just never knew how to tell you without sounding like I was trying to get some kind of advantage in our competition. How do you tell someone that you're halfway in love with them when every interaction you have is adversarial? Sloane felt tears prickling at her eyes. You don't get to do this. You don't get to rewrite history and make it romantic. We made each other miserable, Garrett. Every class was a battle. Every project was warfare. Because we didn't know any other way to deal with what we felt, Garrett said. At least, I didn't. I was 21 years old and I had never met anyone like you. You were brilliant and fierce and so determined. You came from nothing and worked for everything while I had family money and connections handed to me. I didn't know how to bridge that gap. So you made it wider, Sloane said, anger creeping into her voice now. You knew I was on scholarship. You knew I was working 3 jobs. And you still pushed and pushed until every single achievement felt like I had to fight you for it. I know, Garrett said, his voice heavy with regret. I know, and I'm sorry. I was an idiot who thought competition was connection. I thought if I could just prove I was good enough, smart enough, worthy enough, then maybe the playing field would feel level between us. Maybe then I could ask you out without feeling like I was some privileged guy trying to add the scholarship student to my list of accomplishments." Sloane wiped at her eyes angrily. "Is that really how you saw it? You thought I would think you were slumming it by being interested in me? Weren't you?" Garrett asked gently. "Be honest, Sloane. If I had asked you to dinner back then, what would you have said?" She opened her mouth to protest, then closed it. In her mind, she traveled back to her 21-year-old self, exhausted and proud and so certain that people like Garrett Hayes existed in a different world. A world where things came easily, where futures were guaranteed, where struggle was just a concept discussed in sociology classes rather than a daily reality. "I would have said no," she admitted quietly. "I would have thought you were messing with me or that it was some kind of bet. I would have protected myself by pushing you away." "Exactly," Garrett said. "So I stayed in my lane. I competed with you because at least that way I got to be close to you, got to see that fire, got to matter to you even if it was as an opponent." "That's so messed up," Sloane said, but she was almost laughing through her tears. "We're both so messed up." "Spectacularly," Garrett agreed, and now he was smiling too, that crooked smile she remembered from campus. "We could have just talked to each other like normal people, but instead we made college into an academic gladiator arena." The absurdity of it hit Sloane fully. For years of rivalry, of late nights studying to outdo each other, of carefully maintained distance, all because neither of them knew how to simply be honest. She started laughing, really laughing, and once she started she couldn't stop. Garrett watched her with warmth in his eyes. "I've missed that laugh." Sloane wiped her eyes, her laughter fading into something softer. "I had such a crush on you. It was mortifying. You were everything I told myself I shouldn't want, smart and successful and from a world that felt completely foreign to me. So I channeled it into competition. Every time I beat you on a test or presentation, it felt like proof that I belonged, that I was just as good despite coming from different circumstances." "You never needed proof of that," Garrett said firmly. "You were always the best student in our program. Everyone knew it." "Everyone except me," Sloane said. "I spent 4 years terrified someone would figure out I didn't actually belong there. The imposter syndrome was crushing. And you made it worse because you were the standard I measured myself against. If I could beat Garrett Hayes, then maybe I really had earned my place." "I'm sorry," Garrett said again. "I'm sorry I made you feel that way. I'm sorry I didn't have the courage to just tell you the truth." "What truth?" Sloane asked, though she thought she knew. "That I was in love with you by the end of junior year. That senior year, when you started avoiding me, it killed me. I thought maybe you had figured out how I felt and were disgusted by it. That last semester, I must have written and deleted 100 texts trying to find the right words." Sloane's heart hammered. "I avoided you because I couldn't handle my feelings anymore. Every time I saw you with Emma or any of the other girls you dated, it hurt. I had to protect myself. And then graduation came, and I took the first job that would get me far away." "Chicago isn't that far from Evanston," Garrett pointed out. "Far enough," Sloane said. "Or so I thought." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of 5 years of missed chances settling around them. The elevator remained still, the building's evacuation likely complete by now. Through the crack at the doors, they could hear the faint sound of fire trucks outside. "Can I ask you something?" Garrett said. Sloane nodded. "That last day of classes, did you come to my dorm?" Sloane froze. "What makes you think that?" "My roommate mentioned seeing someone who looked like you in the hallway. I was out at an end-of-year thing with the consulting club. I rushed back as soon as he texted me, but you were gone. I always wondered if it was really you, and if it was, why you came." Sloane closed her eyes. "I wanted to tell you goodbye. Actually, I wanted to tell you everything. I had this whole speech planned about how I was sorry for being so competitive, how I wished things could have been different between us, how maybe in another life where I wasn't so proud and scared we could have been friends. Or more than friends. What stopped you? Garrett asked. Your roommate said you were out celebrating with Emma. He assumed we were study partners and mentioned something about you two getting back together over the summer. I left before he could see me cry. We never got back together, Garrett said. Tyler was always terrible at reading situations. Emma and I were done. I spent that summer working at my dad's company and thinking about you constantly. I spent it crying into cheap wine and telling myself I'd made the right choice taking the Boston job, Sloane said. I lasted 6 months there before I moved to Chicago. Closer to home, closer to my mom. She was getting sicker, and I needed to be nearby. Garrett's expression softened. How is your mom? She passed away 2 years ago, Sloane said quietly. Lung disease from years of exposure to industrial cleaning chemicals. She worked herself to death trying to give me opportunities. Sloane, I'm so sorry, Garrett said, and she could hear the genuine grief in his voice. She got to see me succeed at least. She was so proud when I made senior executive. She came to the office once, met my team. It meant everything to her that her daughter had made it into this world she'd only ever seen from the outside, cleaning other people's offices. Sloane felt fresh tears coming and tried to blink them away. But Garrett moved then, crossing the small space to sit beside her. He didn't touch her, just sat close enough that she could feel his. Your mother raised someone extraordinary, Garrett said softly. Someone who inspires people, who fights for what she believes in, who never gives up. That's an incredible legacy. Sloane leaned her head back against the wall. I miss her every day. Sometimes I achieve something at work and my first instinct is still to call her. Then I remember. They sat quietly, shoulders almost touching. The emergency lighting cast everything in warm amber tones, creating a space that felt separate from the real world waiting outside. Can I tell you something I've never admitted out loud? Sloane asked. Please, Garrett said. Presence, solid and warm. When Christine told us we were hiring a creative director from New York, I looked up the candidates. I saw your name on the short list. My heart stopped. I told myself there was no way they would pick you, that it was just coincidence you had applied. And then when you walked into that conference room this morning, part of me was terrified and part of me was relieved. Like maybe the universe was giving us a second chance to get it right. Garrett turned to look at her fully. And what do you want to do with that second chance? I don't know, Sloane admitted. I've spent 5 years building a life that feels stable and safe. Opening myself up to you again feels dangerous. What if we try and it's a disaster? What if the competition was all we ever really had? Or what if it wasn't, Garrett said. What if underneath all that rivalry was something real that we were both too scared to explore? What if we could actually be good together instead of just good at challenging each other? We work at the same company now, Sloane pointed out. That complicates everything. Office relationships are scrutinized. If it goes wrong, one of us might have to leave. I know, Garrett acknowledged. Believe me, I thought about all of that when I was considering this job. I knew you worked here. It was in my research. I almost turned down the interview because of it. Sloane's eyes widened. You knew I was here? Of course I knew. I've been keeping track of your career for 5 years, Sloane. Every promotion, every successful campaign. I followed Apex's work because I knew you were behind it. When the headhunter approached me about this position, I looked it up and saw your name on the marketing leadership page. I spent a week trying to decide if taking this job was brave or incredibly stupid. And you decided on brave? Sloane asked. I decided that running away from you once was enough for one lifetime. If there was even a chance we could figure this out, I had to take it. Garrett reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. His fingers were warm, his grip gentle but sure. "I'm not 21 anymore, Sloane. I'm not afraid to tell you how I feel. I'm not interested in competition. I just want honesty." Sloane looked down at their joined hands. "I'm not 21 either. I'm 32 and set in my ways. I work too much. I'm still guarded. I still have walls up that might never fully come down. And I'm terrified that if we do this, if we really try, I'll mess it up somehow." "Then we'll mess it up together," Garrett said. The elevator lurched suddenly, making them both grab the railing. The lights flickered, then steadied. With a mechanical groan, the car began moving upward. Floor numbers ticked by on the display until they reached the lobby level. The doors opened to reveal 3 firefighters, 2 building engineers, and a very worried-looking Christine Park. "Thank God you're both all right," Christine said, rushing forward. The fire alarm was false, triggered by construction dust, but the system locked down all elevators as a precaution. "We've been working to release them for the past 2 hours." Sloane and Garrett stepped out, blinking in the bright lobby lights. The building had been evacuated, groups of employees clustered on the sidewalk outside visible through the glass doors. Sloane became aware that she and Garrett were still holding hands and gently pulled away, trying to restore professional distance. "We're fine," Sloane assured Christine. "Just glad to be out." Christine looked between them with sharp, assessing eyes. She had not gotten to VP by missing interpersonal dynamics. "Well, since everyone's already evacuated and it's nearly 1 o'clock, why don't we call it a day? We'll resume normal operations Monday morning." The firefighters finished their inspection and gave the all-clear. Employees began filtering back into the building to collect belongings before heading home. Sloane retrieved her bag from the conference room, aware of Garrett moving through the office a few feet away, equally quiet. They ended up at the elevator bank again, this time with a dozen other people waiting. The ride down was silent, professional, the weight of their conversation hanging between them unspoken. On the sidewalk outside, the October wind had picked up, scattering leaves across the plaza. "Sloane," Garrett said as people dispersed around them. She turned to face him, suddenly aware of how exposed they were, how many colleagues might see them talking. "Can I take you to dinner?" Garrett asked simply. "Tonight. Not as co-workers, not as old rivals. Just as 2 people who have a lot more to talk about." Sloane hesitated. This was the moment. She could retreat to safety, maintain professional boundaries, protect the life she had carefully constructed. Or she could take the risk she had been too afraid to take at 21. "Yes," she said before she could overthink it. "But not somewhere fancy. Somewhere real." Garrett smiled, that full genuine smile that crinkled his eyes. "I know just the place." They agreed to meet at 7 and went their separate ways. Sloane spent the afternoon in a daze, replaying their conversation, examining her feelings from every angle. By the time she was getting dressed for dinner, she had talked herself in and out of going 3 times. In the end, it was the memory of her mother's voice that decided her. "You're so careful, baby," her mother had said during one of their last real conversations. "So afraid of making mistakes that you forget to live. Promise me you'll take some chances. Let yourself be happy." Sloane had promised, though she had not really understood what her mother meant at the time. Now, applying lipstick and choosing a dress that was nice but not too formal, she thought maybe she was beginning to understand. The restaurant Garrett had chosen was a small Italian place in West Loop, the kind with checked tablecloths and family photos on the walls. Nothing like the trendy spots where young professionals usually networked. Sloane felt herself relax the moment she walked in. Garrett was already there, seated at a corner table, his tie loosened and jacket draped over the chair. He stood when he saw her, and the look on his face made her heart skip. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "You clean up okay yourself," Sloane replied, sliding into her seat. They ordered wine and pasta, and for the first hour, they talked about everything except work and college. Sloane learned that Garrett had spent a year after graduation backpacking through Southeast Asia, deliberately delaying his entry into the corporate world. He talked about teaching English in Vietnam, about falling off a motorbike in Thailand, about learning to cook traditional dishes from street vendors in Cambodia. My father was furious, Garrett admitted. He had a position waiting for me at Reed Industries, and I just disappeared for 12 months. But I needed to figure out who I was separate from the family name and expectations. Did you figure it out? Sloane asked. Some of it. I learned I actually love creative work, that I'm good at seeing how pieces fit together into a larger story. That's what led me to advertising and eventually to Momentum in New York. Sloane shared her own journey, the struggles of those first years in Boston, the decision to move back to Chicago when her mother got sick. She talked about learning to negotiate for herself, to demand recognition for her work, to build a reputation that had nothing to do with where she came from and everything to do with what she could deliver. You've built something incredible, Garrett said. I've studied Apex's campaigns from the last few years. The work you did on the Morrison account alone should have won awards. It did, Sloane said with a small smile. 2, actually. But who's counting? They laughed, and it felt easy now, natural in a way it never had before. The competition that had defined their relationship was absent, replaced by genuine interest and respect. As dinner wound down, Garrett reached across the table and took her hand again. I want to try this, Sloane. Really try. But I need to know you're in, that you're not going to run when things get complicated. Things will definitely get complicated, Sloane said. Office relationships always are. People will talk. Some will say I'm getting special treatment. Others will say you hired me to your bed. You were there 2 years before I arrived, Garrett pointed out. And you outrank me in some meetings. But yes, people will talk regardless. The question is whether we let that stop us. Sloane thought about her mother again, about promises made and chances not taken. She thought about 5 years of wondering what if, of carefully constructed walls that had never really protected her from heartbreak, just from possibility. I'm in, she said firmly. But we do this right. We tell HR. We maintain professionalism at work. And we take it slow, figure out if this is really something before we make it public. Agreed, Garrett said. Though I should warn you, I've been waiting 5 years for this. Slow might be challenging. Good things are worth waiting for, Sloane said. Someone told me that once. They left the restaurant and walked through the cooling evening, their pace leisurely. Garrett told her about his apartment in Lincoln Park, how he was still unpacking boxes from the move. Sloane described her condo in West Loop, the view of the city she had worked so hard to afford. At the corner where they would part ways, Garrett pulled her close. Can I see you tomorrow? Maybe actually explore Chicago together since I'm still learning the city. I'd like that, Sloane said. He leaned in slowly, and this time when their lips met, there was no emergency lighting or confined space forcing proximity. Just choice, clear and intentional. The kiss was soft, tentative at first, then deeper as 5 years of unspoken feelings found expression. When they finally pulled apart, Sloane was breathless. That was worth waiting for too. Just the beginning, Garrett promised. The weekend unfolded like a dream. They explored the Art Institute, walked the lakefront, shared meals at hole-in-the-wall restaurants Garrett had never tried. They talked endlessly, filling in gaps from 5 years apart, discovering how they had both changed and how some things remained exactly the same. Monday morning arrived too quickly. Sloane dressed for work with nervous energy, wondering how it would feel to see Garrett in the office now that everything had changed between them. They had agreed to keep things professional, to not let anyone know they were seeing each other until they were certain this was serious. The morning passed normally. Sloane had back-to-back meetings, barely time to breathe let alone think about personal matters. It was not until the afternoon creative brief that she saw Garrett again. He was presenting campaign concepts to the marketing team, and Sloane found herself genuinely impressed by his vision. When he opened the floor for feedback, she raised her hand. The approach for the millennial demographic feels fresh, but I think we need stronger data on the Gen Z segment. They're becoming primary consumers faster than the projections suggest. Good point, Garrett said, making notes. Can your team pull those metrics for the next iteration? It was professional, collegial, exactly what they had agreed on. But when the meeting ended and people filed out, Garrett caught her eye and smiled, just for a second. That small moment of connection carried her through the rest of the day. Weeks passed in a careful dance. At work, they were collaborative and respectful. After hours, they were building something real. Sloane met Garrett's sister visiting from Boston. Garrett came to the cemetery with her to visit her mother's grave, standing quietly while she talked to the headstone about second chances. 2 months in, they told HR about their relationship. The HR director, Miriam, was understanding but cautious. We'll need to ensure there's no conflict of interest in project assignments. And I'll need to document this for compliance purposes. But as long as you both maintain professionalism, we can make it work. They did maintain professionalism, perhaps too much. Sloane was hyper-aware of any perception that Garrett was favoring her team. She pushed back harder on his ideas in meetings, questioned his strategies more aggressively, as if to prove their relationship had not softened her professional standards. It came to a head during a high-stakes pitch for a major automotive client. Garrett had developed a bold creative concept, but Sloane felt the market research did not support it. In the pre-pitch meeting with executives, she said so bluntly. The creative is stunning, but we're risking alienating the core demographic that actually purchases vehicles in this category. I think we need to pivot to a more conservative approach. Garrett's jaw tightened. Conservative won't win this account. They hired us specifically because they want innovative thinking. Innovative thinking grounded in data, Sloane countered. Not creative for creativity's sake. The tension in the room was thick. Christine intervened, suggesting they table the discussion and revisit with fresh perspectives. But the damage was done. Colleagues whispered about the friction between marketing and creative, wondering if deeper issues were at play. That evening, Garrett showed up at Sloane's door, frustration evident in every line of his body. We need to talk. Sloane let him in, her own anger simmering. If this is about the meeting, I stand by what I said. The data doesn't support your concept. This isn't about data, Sloane. This is about you sabotaging me to prove a point. You've been doing it for weeks, undermining my proposals, questioning every decision. I thought we were past the competition. I'm doing my job, Sloane shot back. Just because we're together doesn't mean I'm going to rubber stamp bad ideas. Bad ideas? Is that really what you think, or are you so terrified of people thinking you're going soft that you've overcorrected into being hostile? The accusation hit home. Sloane felt her defenses rise, but underneath was the uncomfortable recognition that he might be right. I have worked too hard to build my reputation. I can't afford for people to think I'm compromising my judgment because of our relationship. So instead you prove you're not compromising by actively working against me? Garrett ran a hand through his hair. Sloane, we're supposed to be partners. At work and outside of it. That means collaboration, trust, having each other's backs. I do have your back, Sloane insisted. But I also have to have this company's back. If I think something won't work, I have to say so. Even if you're using impossibly high standards for me that you don't apply to anyone else? Garrett asked quietly. Be honest. Would you have come at anyone else's proposal that hard? Sloane opened her mouth to say yes, then closed it. The truth was she had been harder on Garrett, holding him to standards that were about proving her objectivity rather than genuine professional assessment. "I'm scared," she admitted finally. "I'm scared that people will say I got soft, that I let my personal feelings cloud my judgment. I'm scared that if we fail professionally, it will destroy us personally too. So I've been overcompensating." Garrett's expression softened. He crossed to her, taking her hands. "I'm scared too. This is new for both of us. But we can't let fear make us turn on each other. That's just the old pattern in a new package." "So what do we do?" Sloane asked. "We trust each other. We collaborate like the intelligent professionals we both are. And we stop letting other people's potential opinions dictate how we interact." Garrett pulled her close. "I love you, Sloane. I think I've loved you since you challenged my marketing philosophy in Professor Davidson's class and made me rethink everything I thought I knew. But I need you to love me back without all the walls and defenses." "I do love you," Sloane said, the words feeling both terrifying and freeing. "I'm just learning how to do this, how to be vulnerable and strong at the same time." "Then we learn together," Garrett said, and kissed her. The automotive pitch happened the following week. Sloane and Garrett presented together, having spent long hours integrating the creative vision with solid data support. They challenged each other in the preparation, but constructively, pushing the work to be better rather than tearing each other down. The client loved it, and Apex won the account. Christine called them both into her office afterward. Sloane braced for criticism about workplace relationships, but instead, Christine smiled. "That was the best collaborative work I've seen from marketing and creative in my 10 years here. Whatever you two are doing, keep doing it." 6 months after that elevator got stuck, Sloane and Garrett stood in that same lobby, this time by choice. It was Friday evening, and they were heading out for dinner to celebrate the success of the automotive launch. As they waited for a car, Garrett pulled her close. "Remember when you said good things are worth waiting for?" he asked. "I remember," Sloane said. "This is a really good thing," Garrett said. "And it was worth every minute of waiting, every year of not knowing, every moment of being too scared to take the chance." Sloane smiled, leaning into him. "Are you getting sentimental on me, Hayes?"